Hi, Dave. So I'm so glad you've been able to join us today. I'm excited to have you on the Dental Business Hub.
Yeah, myself included to be part of this. I'm pretty lucky today. It's a good day.
So you have an incredible background to start with. You've done so much. You were a dentist. You started off as a dentist.
Always a dentist. Once a dentist, always a dentist. That
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
leave you.
true. That's true. And you graduated. You just mentioned to me 1991. Is that correct?
Oh, now
87.
throwing darts at me already. Yeah, 97. I graduated from University of California, San Francisco. So very, very proud of being part of that school.
Yeah, but you've also done a lot in globally, you've done a lot in medical innovations and technology. There must have been some moment in your life as a general practice where you said there's more to it. What was that like for you?
Well, okay, with that little segue there, the more to it professionally, like into this global reference that you made, that was kind of something else. But as far as more to it than the kind of reactive sort of approach to dental practice or dental health or services that a lot of us unfortunately find ourselves gravitating to in the busyness of our professional lives, meaning problems come in, people come with problems, there's a quick assessment, and then a reactive mode and that sort of thing. I think we all find that that is a common path, and for many of us, maybe that is our ultimate path, but it's one that can take a toll not only just on ourselves, but also on our teams. And, does it really reflect the highest level of service that we can provide to our patients? I think when you're saying with the aha moment for me, I was very fortunate. Early on, I was just blessed in my journey with learning from some mentors and practice coaches. Right out of the gate, I joined a practice where the dentist I worked for, the office I joined, really strived to be on the leading edge of technology, and this was in a previous century, but really embracing everything that you could bring in that was proven at that point. But then also investing in the people of the practice, and that included the coaching part. And so I might disappoint a bit when I'm not necessarily tech heavy, I'm tech with people heavy, and how those two synergize with each other. And so the aha moment for me, that kept happening for my practices, through my experience with patients, is when I found that myself and my team were able to really build a genuine connection with our patients, a really engaged connection with them. And again, that was, from learning from a lot of folks that have, worked on that for years and years and just paid it forward to us. And then what I mean by that is helping patients to really truly connect with what resonates for me and a lot of others is thinking of their oral health and aesthetic story. So patients have their story, and they arrive on our doorsteps opened, their storybooks open to the chapter that they're on in their oral health and aesthetics, and in a lot of other things too, but we'll just focus on that. And they don't really understand where they are in their story, right? If it's broken teeth, worn teeth, failed restorations, whatever. They often don't even know what's going on with different aspects of what's happening in their oral health and aesthetic story. And so as much as we develop our own skills and techniques and employ technology to help us to have them really understand that storybook. Where are they now? And as they get really engaged with that, very visually, very personally, is then if things aren't so great, if there's things that aren't, wonderful about where they're at, and if things are all great, then that is wonderful, and that's important that they understand that you're thoroughly being able to share that with them. But if there's problems, broken teeth, worn teeth, recession, missing teeth, whatever it might be, is to help them understand the chapters before that led to the chapter they're on.
Right.
And
Right.
I think the storybook analogy really, really helps in that's where root cause lives. What led to where you're at? And again, very personal and very visual, always with the patient so they can really understand it and really wrap their minds around what you're trying to share with them. And with technology, that's never been easier. I mean, gosh, when I started, it took a lot more effort to pull that off. And we're so, and I still do that. I mean, hands are like great. They can demonstrate all sorts of things. Teeth should come together like that.
Right.
So yeah, I think as providers, I kind of want to maybe touch on this, and maybe we'll get to layers. The idea of being a storyteller, and we are storytellers all day long, throughout our lives, but in dental practice for sure. And we have used different ways to try to tell the story. We're trying to help our patients understand. And having them understand what led to where they're at is then also projecting forward to the chapters of their book that haven't been written yet. And it can go either way. It can go in positive directions, or it can go in not so powerful,
Right.
not so great directions. And patients typically don't want a future of uncertainty or heightened risk as far as their oral health and aesthetics or comfort and so forth. And so it gives an opportunity for a patient with you to start to kind of explore what could those future chapters look like. And this is a way of looking at what a lot of people call about case acceptance, and how, which is very procedure focused. It's very, how do I get a patient to accept the crown versus stepping back and how can I help this patient really understand their personal story? And then we together can help them forge a path forward. And what I have found is that I'm getting chills right now. I always do, and I'm not making that up right now, is that I think some of the most emotional and tearful moments in our practices were tears of appreciation, where a patient was like, never cared enough or took the time for me to help me understand this. And so that emotionally charges us all. Emotion leads to fueling action for everybody, and everybody's together. And, I think, that is what fills my cup to this day the most.
I love it.
Part of why I'm so happy to be, with you today, Monica, is that the more we can help our colleagues all embrace this amazing opportunity we all have with our communities, the better. So that was a long answer, but
It was a
that's kind of what my aha moments.
I think it was a perfect answer because you brought in so much in there, and I want to pick it apart a little bit so anyone who's listening for the first time to, yeah, I do. Because I'm a coach as well, and some doctors feel like it's sales if they talk about the next treatment, and some team members too, and nobody wants to be involved in sales. But on the other hand, you have an obligation to let the patient know what's going on in their mouth. And so often they've never been told, like you mentioned, and we don't even have to get into the oral systemic connections to the other things that could be going on with systems in their body.
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk to my clients and say, look with their primary care physician, because a lot of the stuff that's going on in their mouth, you'll see first the doctor needs to know. And it's not just sleep apnea, it's GERD, it's all kinds of things that are going on. And, there are definite oral symptoms that you can talk to their PCP about and kind of give more of a holistic approach to health instead of just, I'm going to fix this cavity. I'm going to deliver this crown. It becomes like this is a human, this is a person with a body and a system of health. And what an impact you can have on people's lives when you build that bridge to whole health. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I think, what I hear you, going into, which I have very strong, passionate beliefs about, is the idea of a procedure-centered type practice, or maybe you might say profit-centered, or doctor-focused, doctor-centered. What's good for me? What are my needs? Versus a practice that is truly patient-centered, truly relationship-centered, truly health-centered, if you will, as well, because that's patient-centered. Is that when you come, and that sounds nice just kind of on the surface. When you dig deeper, as you well know, you and I both well know, when you dig deeper into that there's really specific meanings and differentiations there to the difference between those two. And
Yes.
that reflects on how you go about your day serving the people of your community and your team.
It reflects on your team too, because teams will push back on you if they feel like you expect them to be salespeople, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't get the hygienist did not become an RDH so that she could sell cars
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
crowd. And I love it when, if a morning meeting looks like this patient owes this and this patient owes that and da da da, and it's just all very profit driven instead of patient driven,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to get a whole
Mm-hmm.
different result throughout the day.
Yeah.
And when you look at the hygienists as partners in healthcare with the patient, and the same with your assistants, I mean, it's a team effort to get a patient to full health, right? So,
Yeah.
what is some good advice you have for dentists who are listening to something like this for the first time?
Yep.
Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, of course. I try to pay forward what I can. And everybody's going to have their own personal, obvious, version of whatever we share. That's true for all of us. But what I've found has worked amazingly transformational for myself and my practices, but also I've had the privilege of seeing practices, honestly, across the world because of my role at Align Technology, is that this idea of identity, I guess I would call it. We can dig deeper into that if we want, which I would like to, but it is with a hygienist, for example, is how do they really define and connect with their identity in the practice? And so, as an example, a transformational change we made in our practice, learning from our practice coaches, is the idea of are you a hygienist, which has its own traditional roles and labels, or are you an oral health coach? And
Mm.
our hygienist very proudly took on the role of an oral health coach. Who doesn't want to be a coach in some way? Who doesn't want that sort of that feeling that gives?
I love what you were saying about we were talking about the oral systemic health. So it's not just one thing. It's not just fixing a tooth with the patient. Sometimes you're fixing a system because there's an oral systemic connection, and the whole team has a chance to be healthcare providers in that situation. And I would love to hear your words of wisdom about how to bring the team into that relationship with the patient.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's key. We all realize it, but it's nice to it's important to be reminded this is not a one person show in a dental office. It's a team sport. So I would kind of layer upon the oral health and systemic systems, as you mentioned, and also with the oral health and aesthetics, that's part of a chewing engine. Okay, so there's a biomechanical chewing engine where there's different parts between the jaw and the muscles and the bite and so forth. So, as with, most things in our body is the further we get away from harmony, the further we get into where things aren't working together well. It's very easy to explain to patients as well. This is that when there is even a little bit of disharmony, it can start to build tension into the system, tension into the oral health and systemic system, or tension into the chewing engine system. And then tension in any engine or any system can then put stress on it. Think of gears, bear with me. I'm getting back to the question of the roles, but if you think of an engine, gears and teeth on the gears, is that when they line up right, everything's working. It's just kind of an easy thing to relate to. If those teeth on the gears are even just a little bit off, is you can sense, and we're familiar with stress that can put on our cars or our bikes or whatever, just imagine that. So an easy way for a lot of folks, including our patients, kind of relate to this idea of a system and stress is that they just think of their cars, for example, or a bike or something where the parts have to work in harmony. And so if you imagine gears and the gears have teeth and those go together like that, is that even if that's off a little bit, it starts to generate stress and tension in the system.
Right.
And that's true with the mouth. That's true with our whole body health, is that as stress and tension builds in the system, then if that goes unchecked, it raises the risk for turning into distress and distress into disease. And
Wow.
so the deterioration and breakdown is just a basic physiologic, physics, biomechanical truth. And so as providers, if we really identify ourselves as being an earnest provider and services to our patients with oral health and aesthetics, is to consider how can we help impact that as broadly as possible. So to circle back to the teams is that as an office, if you empower into your teams this building this sense of identity within themselves, and then as a hygienist, what was transformational for our practice, and this was, I learned this from some really amazing practice coaches, is the idea of, well, a hygienist has traditional labels and definitions around it. What about an oral health coach? And so our hygienists consider themselves very, very proudly as oral health coaches, and everybody kind of wants to be a coach in some ways. That feels very, empowering. But also the patients saw them as that. And who doesn't want to have a coach, a personal fitness coach, a nutrition coach, gosh, we all would love to get a little bit of guidance in every, aspects of our lives. And so our patients really valued it really quickly too. This was a quick transition, a quick transformation.
First
And
of all, the
so,
term. I love the term oral health coach. I mean, I started smiling when you said it. It's just like that actually fits what they do. They're educating, they're supporting, they're leading. I love it.
It's true. It's not something that's fabricated for some purpose. It's like, hey, really think about who you are, what you're trying to do here professionally, and what fills your cup. And so what my hygienists found is that their cup never filleth so much. And same with the patients. But as part of that is, well, does that mean you're more than just mechanically removing tartar and calculus and disease from the mouth? What else do we need to be thinking about? And so back to the systems is the oral health and systemic connections. And then also with the mechanics of the mouth and the powerful role that a traumatic malocclusion, when teeth don't line up very well, not in harmony with how the jaw wants to work, is that creates tension and stress in this chewing engine. And so that leads to raises the risk for worn teeth, broken teeth, cracked teeth, missing teeth, bone loss, recession,
Right.
EMJ disorders, you name it. And so if we really are oral health coaches, how can we not have that in the front of our minds every day as we're helping our patients? And then creating annual plans, we map out what's our plan with this patient for this year, and how we incorporate this into that plan. And so that's also where technology comes into the discussion, is that to do that effectively and very efficiently, there are tools now, such as the iTero 3D scanner, that facilitate that like never before in a way that patients can really understand.
A picture is worth 1,000 words. And, I love the way, you can highlight things and see things and point to things on a big screen instead of a little laptop. And, it's engaging.
Absolutely. There's so many studies in neuroscience, neurophysiology, that the visual parts of our brain, they've mapped it and so forth, how powerful that is as far as our interpretation of the world around us and also in our decision making. So if you take that into consideration, what I advise when I'm in my own offices, but also definitely working with others, is when you're communicating with patients, as often as, in fact, all the time, as often as possible, have it be visual and personal. So their smile, their face, their teeth, their health is visual and personal, and therefore it's very emotional.
Oh, I love
Not
that.
emotional in a in a kind of negative connotation. Emotional meaning a driving forward kind of way, an empowering kind of way.
Well, it
And
also means something to you. Honestly, if I'm looking at my map versus someone else's map, I am more emotionally invested in my own oral health than I am in
it's
some random.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with iTero, the iTero 3D scanner is an example. I mean, we can kind of roll the technology into this. Another simple, approach or strategy, I guess I promote for my own offices, and I've seen countless examples across the globe of uber successful practices that to embrace this. Is you have the people in your practice, the technology, and the time. People, technology, and time.
Okay.
And looking at the first two, the people and the technology, is how well do you empower and leverage and synergize those two together? So to the technology part, for example, well, we talked a bit about the people part, like with the hygienists, for example. So looking at the people part is, as a leader in my practice, am I investing in myself first, so that I'm building my strong sense of identity? I have beliefs that drive me forward. This is how I see myself. This is how I consider myself as a healthcare provider and as a person and as a professional and so forth, and how this reflects in my services. It's very purposeful. It drives me forward. And with that is that now I embrace my team, and I want to do everything I can to have my team build their own personal version of that. And together we have a combustible alignment, right, of an entire office with that driving belief, that sense of purpose. And, you can see I'm leaning forward,
Yeah.
even into the camera, because you can't help when you feel that in the front of your mind. It's very just powerful. And the patients recognize that, and it's very magnetic at the same time. And so with that, you look at the technology, and how do you bring in the right technologies, and then when you bring them in, leverage them to empower those people? Because the technologies in our practice are really, in my mind, they're meant to empower the people. The technologies by themselves just sit in the corner of the room or on a shelf or whatever they do. It's when we use them to take action. And with the iTero 3D scanner is that, a lot of folks consider 3D scanners as kind of procedural tools, I'd call them. And meaning that, they use them to facilitate or make more efficient or better experience for scanning for a crown prep or scanning for an implant or Invisalign or whatever. But it's about the procedure. Now, even in that, I would say it's a communication device. It's still a communication device. It's communicating, this is what's happening in the chair, and I'm trying to communicate it to a lab, to a software, to some other, so it's still a communication device. You follow me?
Yes. And actually, I was
The
going to
key
say
with
that
it,
that's not
yeah,
what, even if you're using it, I was going to say, even if you're using it for just those very basic things, it's not a bad use. I'm glad when I see a dentist that at least has taken a step to get the technology. What you're saying is how to expand the use of that. But just that they've taken that step to get the technology tells me already that they're interested in educating their patient on a different level and giving them a better experience. That alginate in the mouth is horrible, right? Versus the
yeah.
scanner.
Yeah, the patient experience, I mean, I think more and more patients are just going to come to expect it. I kind of wish they did more already, but there's no comparison to the experience. And so if you consider a 3D scanner as a communication device, and I just outlined the procedural part of that. But to me, the most powerful application is upstream. It's in communicating with the patients on that storybook I was referring to, where they're at, helping them understand that visually and personally. And so that's where the iTero 3D scanner, quite honestly, really sets itself apart tremendously, is that the tools and features and ease of use within 3 minutes, for example, well under it now with our newest Lumina scanner. It's called Lumina. But anyway, I'm not trying to sell iTeros here. I just seen how powerful they are, and I see what it does for offices. I see what it's done for me. So it's just all genuine here. Is that within 3 minutes you can scan a patient very easily, and the learning curve is super short to be able to do this now. And now you have photo quality, basically 3D images of their teeth and gums and so forth. Everything intraoral. Wow. Okay, you have that. You can also make it, monochromatic like models, which is easier to see some things like recession, for example. You're able to magnify into different areas. You're able to actually use a heat map, we call it an occlusogram, where it uses colors to show where the teeth are hitting too hard or not, or where they shouldn't hit and they are hitting. And so that's really easy for patients to follow. Red is bad here. You don't want a red contact there. You want, and so the patients can follow along this journey basically into their oral health and aesthetic world very easily. And then you can also track that over time. If you take a scan, let's say on day one, and you take another scan, a year or two later, is you can see what's changed, what hasn't changed, which is super powerful as we look through that storybook going forward. And in doing all that, the iTero also in that scan, as you can see through the teeth now, we have near infrared imaging called NIRI feature, NIRI imaging on it, where now without using any X-ray ionizing radiation, this is not at all the same.
Oh, way.
Yeah, it'll let you see through the teeth to where you can see specifically through the enamel and then right at the enamel dentin junction there. So
Wow.
you can see caries. Statistically, it's shown that it's actually more sensitive to picking up early caries than bite rings. But also, when we're taking bite rings, we have to get the right angle. If teeth aren't lined up right, that eliminates all of that because the angles don't matter. You've scanned this 3D scan. And so you have that within 3 minutes too. And so as you go through with the patient, reviewing the findings very quickly, and the patient's leaning forward, glued to this, because it's like an amazing experience, right? They're not used to this. We take it for granted in our offices that patients are used to this.
Right.
And as you see an image that's meaningful, there's a little camera icon on the upper right, and the provider just clicks it, and it saves all these screenshots of what you're showing. If you've ever scrapbooked, you're
Yeah.
making a personal scrapbook for the patient. Their
I
storybook. Remember the storybook?
love
We're
it. Yeah.
filling in the pictures.
Yeah. It's a whole experience actually is what it comes to. And, as soon as you started saying about the capabilities, taking the photos and having these pictures, the storybook came to mind. But honestly, there's another place in your practice where you tell stories. Yes, you have to bring the patient in. The team now owns their role as coach, as oral health coach.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you also have these fantastic images you can use for insurance. I mean, I'm sure you've seen some impact on that. Yeah.
I'm not surprised you picked that up, right?
Yeah, because the case, for patients to say yes, they need to know that they're maximizing their benefits too. So you've just wrapped so much into this. And I know a lot of times it feels like, oh, technology is so much to invest in. But if you look downstream at your return on investment, I would say this is huge.
It is huge, and I'm glad you tapped into that. You know, you're the business-minded folks, person, here is absolutely true. Yeah, the documentation that you can provide now it's unprecedented.
The other thing is two patients rely on you to make best case possible for them to get whatever benefits they have, 2,500, 1,500. That's significant for them. So now you've become not just an oral health coach, but you've kind of become, I don't know, the facilitator of them being able to use their benefits. Now, look, we're going to send everything we possibly can to the insurance to give them every opportunity to say yes so that you can get this treatment. I love that.
Absolutely. I guess in the spirit of March Madness is you're championing them. You're their champion.
Yes.
You're their champion on helping them understand their situations. You're the champion in helping to plot a path forward together with them that could provide, hopefully, a lot of benefits long term and short term. And then you're their champion with the insurance companies and making sure that financially this is very comfortable and fair to them. So I love it. And it's all communication. That 3D scanner is just communicating in all these different ways.
And honestly, even when it's cosmetic services that maybe your insurance won't even cover, that story is still so important. And you just changed something in me today. Like I coach with a lot of practices, and I'm always talking about verbal skills and how we talk to patients. It's the story, but you have to first perceive yourself in a different role than normal, I think.
Yeah. I mean, kind of circling back to identity, I did want to touch on the investment for a second because I think that's an important, you mentioned the ROI and so forth of a scanner, especially iTero, is if you think about investment, I guess in your practice, I know this is very much lined up with how you help practices, is you can have investments that do require financial investment. You can think of it as hopefully a productive liability. So I'll kind of just sort of label it as it is a liability. I have purchased something, I've taken a loan or something. So there is a financial but productive liability, not a debt. A debt would mean that I'm not getting production out of that liability. So now, how much money went out or how much cash flow is going out doesn't match how much I put in, right? So that would just be a negative debt. But a productive liability like an iTero is that, yes, I have put that money towards that, but it has generated so much more productivity. Now, at the same time, the investments in our people, that's usually an investment of time, not of the financial part. And less turnover, more productive employees, more productive team. All of those reflect in a savings, so reduced costs, increased revenue, production, right? We're having fun now, aren't we? We're moving the levers of a practice on how to big profitability, reducing the cost. It's so costly to not have effective team members, not have morale high, losing people, having to replace people. So if we invest on the good people we have, so production up, costs down, and then also time goes down.
Right.
I spend time to invest, but ultimately we're so more efficient because I'm also supporting them with the technology. So I just love, I know you do too, like when you can help practices understand the levers.
Yeah,
It's
this
pretty fun.
I had a shift today, and I didn't expect that for me. Just talking about the oral health coach from the hygiene perspective, and if someone's training your team and they're not helping the hygienist see themselves, there's seeing yourself as a licensed professional. And then they're seeing yourself as an oral health coach. And the coach gives you a chance to build those relationships and like really come alongside
Yeah.
it's totally different. And then when you start talking about treatment, the patient's listening. And when you can show them, then they're moving forward to, like you said, they're leaning forward because this is their mouth and their health. And then tie it all together with having maybe your financial coordinator being able to use this incredible technology to improve reimbursement rates. This is huge.
It's proven too. It's not theory. There's evidence of how this works in such a authentically an authentic way to serve patients at your highest level. It's proven. It's exciting for you and I because we can see it, we can feel it, and we try to have others kind of start to share that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so with the identity, like that oral health coach too, remind me, I was going to touch a bit on that. This sense of identity, I mentioned that earlier, is and I'm not a fan of having my sense of identity attached to labels and roles because they can come and go, and they do come and go. But the oral health coach, I think, is just a way of a projection of what that means to me, the oral health coach kind of idea. Is that identity, I mean, again, that I talked about that driving, compelling belief of how I will carry myself through my day. So in that is it helps to create and guide the activities and decision making, what I say and what I do and how I say and do it during the time I have with these patients, right?
Right.
And so there's definite specific ideas on activities you do that bring that patient into their story. And the ITERO is, obviously a huge one, is that, when you start to build in what we call wellness scanning, is that's a very contemporary, very high tech way of bringing the patient visually and personally into the story, into the experience. But there's other ways too. I mean, a perio probe, not used for the conventional ways, but for example, using a perio probe to measure the crowding, let's say, of teeth on the upper and lower arch.
Wow.
If I'm a hygienist at my practice, I better care about how those teeth are coming together and the alignment, because I know that impacts tremendously the oral health of that patient. Not even talking about the aesthetics, just the health and function of that patient. And so my driving belief means I have to assess this. And so I get the perio probe out. I assure the patient I'm not going to check the pockets, and so they don't flinch. I'm just going to use a
Yeah.
little measuring stick to measure the crowding on your teeth. And the patient's like,
I
wait,
love
what? What are you doing?
that. Is absolutely, let me just confess, I have extreme dental anxiety. So every time they want to pull that little probe out, I'm already upset. And I have my hygienist uses cane tips to numb my gums before she does that because I just can't handle it.
So you're a good example of why you preface it with, I'm not going to be checking the pockets. I'm just going to use those little measuring stick, away from the gums. I'm not going to come close to the gums. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. But you often see crowding, and does that help any with case planning? Like if they are going to go into Invisalign, do you need that measurement in specific? Or
Look at yeah, see? It all starts, all the dots connect. Yes, that is an essential part of selecting cases that the provider, in this, I'll say Invisalign provider, can confidently have success with over and over. The amount of crowding is important, one of the important measurements. There's several. But yeah, and it's a dialogue starter. The patient's like, what are you doing? Wait, oh, wow, why? And now the patient wants to know a bit about the why. So now the hygienist, as they're doing, is explaining the why.
yeah,
And at the very least, the patient's feeling like, wow, nobody's ever done this with me before. I really
yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you.
And here's the thing, building a business means differentiating yourself in your community. Let's face it, there are some communities where there's 12 doctors in one building, let alone in a 1 mile radius, depending on where you are. If you're giving that patient a new experience that they've never had before and that you're building value into that experience, then you've just put yourself above everyone else in your community who's not doing that same thing. There's an investment in time in making this kind of building a practice like this. We mentioned time being one of those other factors. Training is huge.
Yeah.
You get that kind of training.
Well, there's, obviously professional coaching. I'm speaking to somebody in that regard right now. I aspire towards that daily for myself, but just within your own practice is, I'm sure you're well versed in, is the difference between working on your practice versus just working in your practice.
Yes.
Or business. It's true for any business or any organization. I know folks get that on the surface. It's like, oh, I need to dedicate time to actually work on this organization and how it runs. But again, just like that belief I was talking about, okay, so you believe it. All right. If I were to shadow you all day and shadow your team all day, do I see this belief you're saying reflected in the activities and decision making and culture in your practice?
Right.
Unfortunately, there's often a gap there,
Well,
and
it's because
that can create some positive tension.
But it's because implementation is a thing. It's really hard to implement. If you don't have someone on your team who's like the master implementer, who's able to encourage everyone else to stay on task, sometimes you'll see things that happen for 2 weeks and then they peter off. You know, you get the training, you go to a seminar or whatever, you come back, you're high. It's not too long before you hit that valley and you go back to same old, same old. So I'm wondering, like, if you're going to be making this, first of all, you mentioned the doctor having owning his own vision of his practice.
Yep.
He needs to communicate that to, and then you mentioned each of them kind of buying into that vision.
Uh-huh.
And so building that vision, sometimes it's coaching, sometimes it's just the doctor does a fantastic job of delivering his vision for his practice and helping the team. I guess it's following his leadership to build that vision. That's super important. So I'm wondering if you have any advice to help dentists kind of lead their team into this new paradigm? Is there tools? Are there educational materials? Is there coaching available with Align? Where do they start?
Start with you and I. I mean, I mean, just to throw it out there. I actually help offices every week with this, these sorts of I'd say challenges, but these massive opportunities. There's really little that's as gratifying to me, honestly, as seeing two things. The little fire that's inside all of us of these beliefs I'm talking about, because I know it's in there because we all have similar training background and so forth, dental colleagues and so forth, is how can I help them to kindle that fire and get that fire burning hotter and hotter inside of them, where it develops into that driving belief. It's like, yes, this is the kind of provider I want to be. This is who I am. This is what carries me forward every day. And when they burn that fire from within, it's not external motivation. It's not me inspiring you and showing you, giving you amazing external motivations. Those will work, hopefully in the short term, but they don't tend to be sustainable. They're not as personal enough and so forth. But if I can help you to help you light that fire within yourself, it's already lit, just ignite it. Now we have something that could be sustainable because it's going to drive your decision making forward. And that's the same approach with your team members too. It's not all about me. I hate to tell my doctor colleagues that. Sorry, it's not all about us. It's about how well we can have others get on board and share their personal version of our collective vision as a group. If people, I share this analogy, and people, most of them, even if they haven't river rafted, so I'm going down river rafting with you now. Okay, you ready? But they get it. And there was also a recent movie several years back called Boys in the Boat. You ever heard of that?
No.
It was a fabulous movie about the University of Washington's crew team way, 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 way back when, and how they just, startled the world by, I think they won the Olympic medal. Spoiler alert.
That's okay.
Anyhow, it's about crew. It's a crew team. And so going to the river rafting thing is if you ever have river rafted, you ever river rafted?
Absolutely. Are you kidding? A river ran right through our town. Yes.
There
My
you
mother,
go.
my mother took her first river raft trip when she was 77.
Yeah, you go, girl. I love it. 77, and it's her first one. See,
Yeah.
that's the sort of person I aspire to be. And so when you're going river rafting with a group, what's the first thing that the river rafting guide, has you do?
Well, they want to make sure you have on your life preservers, et cetera.
Okay, we gotta be safe. What
Yeah.
about when we get in the boat? Do we just take off?
Oh no, they show you where to sit. They balance the boat. They give you rafts and they give you the little paddles and give you little instructions on the paddles and
They start
yeah.
running you through how we're going to navigate this river ahead of us, right? Because we don't want to just float randomly down this river, especially not the parts of the Colorado River. But we want to
They
do
also,
so in
they also
an
tell you how to
intent.
get people. They also tell you how to get people back in a boat.
I love it. I haven't used that one yet. I'm going to use that one too because every now and then we do fall out of the boat. I
Yeah,
I, I love that. I'm going to steal it. I'll give it to Monica. I'll give Monica credit for that.
so
But they again, we're going to go down this river, and there's going to be challenges ahead. There's going to be rapids and rocks and currents and so forth. And so we want to be able to navigate this as a team, as a group. I'm going to be your leader as the guide, but let's go through some exercises on everybody rowing in the same way, the same direction, or however we're going to navigate. So with the crew team, it's more just about the same power, the same cadence, the same intention and
right.
determination. That's what leads that crew boat forward to ultimately win. So with the river raft guide, they're going to help us all work together on this raft to complement everyone. We're all having the same navigational determination. So think of an office, an organization, is that when we can effectively get everybody to share the vision of what we're trying to do, how we want to navigate this path forward, is that it's important that everybody's rowing together. People aren't taking timeouts. If I have a member of my team that decides, well, I'm taking a timeout, well,
Right.
that affects the whole vessel. It affects the whole organization in some way. And so that's a time to meet with the person, or like you said, if they fall out of the boat, pull them back in. And give them every opportunity that they can be part of this team again. If they're not, honestly, they're not the right person. That's kind of the way it is, in my opinion. You have to have the right people, but you have to invest in them. And so what happens if you don't have that navigation is you float down a river, you randomly get caught in eddies, you bang into rocks, you want a fun day where you navigate the river and feel good about it and then high-five each other and have a nice picnic, or do you want to get stuck on rocks and bang into things and maybe lose someone overboard?
If you're really building a team, and that's what a practice is, a business is a team. It's all about people. It's about your
Uh-huh.
internal people and then
Yeah.
the people whom you serve. Common vision, for sure. The tools that they need to excel, and of course, the knowledge to implement. I think support is important, and having, yeah, right. And of course, all of that comes the vision. So we have to build a system that works, because systems work, people don't. So sometimes you're right. Someone's going to fall out of the boat. You may not be able to drag them in no matter how much you grab their life preserver. They're out. They're going to get down the stream. But if you have a system that works, because we're all in this situation now in dentistry where we're hiring people, we're seeing a paradigm shift even in the way the dental employees come into your practice and how long they stay, et cetera. You have to have a system that you can bring a new person into relatively quickly. I think technology helps bridge that gap tremendously fast compared to not having it.
Yeah, huge. I think it's part of the enjoyment of the job too. So like, I'm going to finish up on this one, I swear, with the river, but the picnic. I mentioned you have a picnic. And
Okay.
honestly, I haven't even talked about it that way that much before. But so let's say you get down and we have the picnic and only the doctor is getting most of the picnic. Most of the fruits of the labor of this journey, and everybody else is like, gets very little. That's probably not going to last very well. You're not going to keep that team together. So sharing in some fashion, obviously financial incentives, time incentives, whatever it might be, that helps to reward those that have helped navigate that path. And that is critical. Everybody's having a darn good picnic at the end of that stretch of
Absolutely.
the river.
Absolutely.
The other part is what if you get and you just throw financial incentives at a team? That happens all the time at offices. I'm just going to throw money at them or whatever, and I expect them to perform and run down the river and get beat up. If you get beat up that whole way down the river, you're bleeding, you've lost a leg or whatever, and now they serve you the picnic. It's like, okay, thanks for the food, but I don't feel too good. And
Yeah.
so it's the two combined.
Yeah. It's culture for sure. And as the leader of your practice, if you haven't put on your CEO hat yet as a dentist, that has to happen. You are the leader. There's
Yep.
a level of leadership that's just expected. You don't get out of it by having an office manager or your wife in the
Yeah.
practice. No, you
Yeah.
have to take that leadership role. And leadership is part of leadership is inspiring, it's nurturing, it's protecting, it's a lot of other things besides just I know how to, wield the drill. That's not it.
Yeah. I think when we decided to have this chat together, it was framed as digital revolution or transformation. So we've gone heavy into the empower the practice mode, which I think is super important.
Yeah.
But I could bring it back a bit to the digital part. And this is just from my personal experiences, having been at Align Technology, just very fortunate, almost 9 years now, behind the curtain, if you will, and really, really understanding, having a front row seat and directing a lot of it on how we develop so many solutions that align. So, a lot of people think of Invisalign, they think of the plastic aligners, and they think of perhaps our treatment planning software called ClinCheck, and those are both amazing. They are. But what they don't realize is what we call our Align digital platform. And I'm not trying to necessarily, get out and promote this whole thing, but I've just seen how successful it is, and I've had a front row seat at developing all the innovations that are part of it. And what it is that what we looked at was a patient journey, honestly, mostly through a general practice, not necessarily an ortho practice, but both, but mostly a general practice, is the patient journey from where they're not even a patient yet of the practice. They're maybe just considering a practice, or maybe they are a patient, but they're just starting to consider maybe something, doing something about maybe their smile or their bite or whatever. They're kind of in that early part of the prospect or early part of the journey. And then all the way through record taking and communication with the patient and diagnosis and then treatment planning and then treatment delivery and then monitoring and troubleshooting the delivery and then getting into restorative or implant phases of treatment and retention and so forth. So that whole journey is that what we created were digital solutions for each step that are all aimed at facilitating the people of the practice to deliver an exceptional experience and very efficient, very effective experience for the patients. And so, like our practice app, for example, where you have this connectivity with patients through the means of an app, which is what we're kind of used to. So that'd just be one example. And there's a lot of features within that app that build that connection. So
That's huge.
that is huge because again, it's that technology to the people. That's why that's so in front of my head, is that I knew that worked in practices. And so when I came to Align, I know that was a personal mission of mine, is how can I help us to create this technology that helps the people through that journey? And we've been pretty darn successful at it. Not enough of our colleagues, professional, dentists, realize all that's available to them. It's massive.
That's why I wanted to have this talk with you, because some people are just, you buy a practice, the dentist is retiring, and you have to update that practice. Where do you start? What does that look like for you? Or you're in a practice that has a whole lot of technology that you're just not using because you don't know the full capabilities of it. You've blown my mind today with some of this stuff, just talking about just that one piece of technology, from the iTero. But there's other technology in your office. I think it's incumbent upon me, I guess, having this podcast to just open people's curiosity about, what do I have in my practice? What don't I know about how to use it? Could I do more? Could I do better? And how support my team?
I think you do have to really make the most out of the practice. You have to have the right tools. You do. And so for me, honestly, the iTero scanner is a hub to that. And that's just a completely peer-to-peer colleague recommendation. I've seen too much to see it any other way. Offices across the world, honestly, but just very intimate experiences with offices. It's a hub of that communication within that practice, visual and personal.
I hope the dentists that are watching today are getting curious about how technology can fit into their practice. If they've got old equipment, maybe they just need to take another look at it and see, what am I missing about the capabilities of this equipment I already have? Invest in the training that's necessary to support your
Yeah.
team so that they can properly implement it and give better care to the patients when they know how to use the full capabilities of all this technology.
Yeah. It's not a one and done. And so, for example, at Align, we have a pod of team members that are responsive and take it very personally to help practices be successful. And one of those members is called a digital adoption specialist. And so they work intimately with the office on helping them make the most out of the iTero, making the most out of the Align digital platform, helping them implement it, working with the teams on training. And so we do take that to heart because it helps to have a partner to guide you. For
I love that. Digital adoption specialist. I think every practice needs to tap into that, because sometimes it's overwhelming. But I also think stepping into the technological age is absolutely necessary. We don't have any choice at this point. This is 2025. And if you're not incorporating technology, you are going to effectively be hurting your practice. Certainly.
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining me and for spending time with me. Like I said, you've opened my eyes to some things I hadn't really thought about, especially the oral health coach. That is my huge takeaway for today. I love it. Digital adoption specialist is another one, but also just delving into the value of storytelling within the practice. So I think you've just delivered above and beyond anything I expected. I'm so thankful to you for spending time with me today.
I want to thank you, Monica, for this opportunity, sincerely and honestly. And I've learned too. And one of the things I learned is that we have folks like us that are in it together to pay it back, pay it forward, and help our colleagues in our profession, ultimately their communities and the patients they serve. So I am superly, I appreciate, you giving me this chance to meet with you. And I had a lot of fun too. So hope it does some good.
Likewise. And
All
I
right.
haven't stopped smiling since started talking. So thank you so much for the time you spent today. And I hope to meet you in person someday.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.